Your dog is about to do something in the next few seconds. Maybe they are lying across the room watching you. Maybe they are pressed against your leg as you sit. Maybe they are in another room entirely. But the moment your body language shifts even slightly, they will know. And somewhere in the neural architecture of that animal's brain, a process that took 15,000 years of coevolution to construct is running silently, constantly, reading you in ways that no human being on this planet ever could. But here is what almost nobody talks about. In the 3 seconds before your dog growls, in that razor-thin window of time that most owners either miss entirely or catastrophically misinterpret, your dog's brain is executing one of the most sophisticated emotional risk assessments in the entire animal kingdom. And if you do not understand what is happening inside that mind during those 3 seconds, you are not just missing a behavioral cue. You are missing the difference between a dog who feels heard and a dog who feels cornered. Stay with me through this entire video, because what we reveal in the final section completely reframes what a growl actually is, and why the most dangerous thing you can ever do when your dog growls might be exactly what every instinct in your body is telling you to do. To understand those 3 seconds, we have to start much earlier. We have to start with what the canine brain is doing before any visible signal appears at all, because the story of a growl does not begin in the throat. It begins in a structure deep inside the temporal lobe called the amygdala. The amygdala is the brain's threat detection center, and in dogs it is extraordinarily sensitive, shaped by tens of thousands of years of survival pressure into a biological early warning system of almost incomprehensible precision. The moment the amygdala detects a stimulus it categorizes as potentially threatening, it does not wait for the dog to consciously decide how to respond. It fires, immediately, automatically. Before the prefrontal cortex has processed a single piece of rational information, the amygdala has already begun a neurochemical cascade, triggering the release of cortisol and norepinephrine through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, elevating heart rate, shunting blood toward the major muscle groups, dilating the pupils, and heightening all sensory input simultaneously. This entire sequence takes less than a quarter of a second. Your dog's body is already in a state of full sympathetic nervous system activation, before their conscious mind has even registered what triggered it. Now here is where it gets fascinating. Dogs do not simply react to threats, they assess them. And the assessment process that occupies those 3 seconds before a growl is a layered, nuanced, multi-channel neurological evaluation that simultaneously processes olfactory data, acoustic data, visual spatial data, postural memory, and prior associative learning all at once. Let us walk through each of these channels, because each one tells you something critical about what your dog is experiencing in that pre-growl window. The olfactory channel activates first, always, before your dog's eyes have fully registered a stimulus, before their ears have fully oriented toward it. Their vomeronasal organ, a chemoreceptive structure located at the base of the nasal cavity that operates entirely separately from the main olfactory system, is already sampling the chemical emotional signature of the environment. Research in canine olfactory neuroscience has demonstrated that dogs can detect the volatile organic compounds associated with human fear, anxiety, and aggression. These compounds, primarily alterations in the chemical composition of human sweat driven by hormonal changes, are processed by the vomeronasal organ and routed directly to the amygdala and hypothalamus without passing through the cortex at all. This means that before you have said a word, before you have moved a muscle, your dog may already know from the chemistry of the air around you that something is wrong. They are reading the emotional truth of your body before you have expressed it externally. If you are nervous, frustrated, or preparing to react with force, your dog smells that decision forming before you have made it. The acoustic channel activates simultaneously. Dogs can hear frequencies ranging from approximately 40 Hz to 65,000 Hz, a range roughly 3 times broader than the human auditory spectrum. But it is not just the frequency range that matters here. It is the precision of temporal auditory processing. Dogs can distinguish between two sounds separated by as little as 1/600 of a second, compared to the human threshold of approximately 1/300 of a second. This means that in those 3 pre-growl seconds, your dog is processing the micro-variations in your voice tone, your breathing rate, the subtle acceleration in your footstep cadence, and the acoustic qualities of the environment around them with a level of detail that is neurologically inaccessible to you. A slight tightening of your voice, a barely perceptible quickening of your breath, the almost inaudible shift in the way your foot contacts the floor when your body tenses, your dog hears all of it. Take a moment right now to think about your own dog. Have you ever noticed them react to something you were barely aware of yourself? A sound outside, a change in the atmosphere, your emotional state before you had consciously identified it. Drop their name in the comments and tell me one time your dog seemed to know something before you did. I read every single comment, and the patterns that emerge in your responses are genuinely extraordinary. The visual spatial channel processes posture and movement geometry. Dogs are masters of what ethologists call kinetic reading, the interpretation of body movement patterns to predict behavioral intent. Research from the Clever Dog Lab in Vienna has shown that dogs have specialized neural processing pathways dedicated specifically to reading the postural and locomotor patterns of both humans and other dogs. In the pre-growl assessment window, your dog is calculating trajectory, velocity, posture angle, eye contact duration, and the spatial relationship between their own body and the approaching stimulus simultaneously. They are not just seeing you walk toward them. They are running a predictive model of where you are going, how fast you are going there, what your posture communicates about your emotional state, and how all of that maps onto their prior experiences with similar scenarios. This is why a direct frontal approach from a stranger triggers a threat response in many dogs that an angled, indirect approach does not. The geometry of the movement itself carries meaning in the canine threat assessment system. Now we arrive at the 3 seconds themselves, the window between complete internal activation and the vocalization of the growl. In these 3 seconds, something remarkable is happening. The dog's brain is running what behavioral scientists call a conflict resolution process. The amygdala has fired. The sympathetic nervous system is activated. Cortisol is already rising. But simultaneously, the prefrontal regions of the canine brain, the areas responsible for learned behavioral inhibition and social communication, are generating a countersignal. The dog is not simply exploding into reaction. They are holding tension between 2 competing drives, the drive to respond to the perceived threat and the drive to communicate before escalating. And it is in this precise tension that every visible pre-growl signal lives. The body stiffens first. This is not a subtle signal. If you are watching for it, you will see the entire muscular architecture of the dog change in an instant, from the fluid, relaxed looseness of a comfortable animal into something architecturally different. The muscles along the top line engage. The neck lengthens slightly. The tail movement changes character. It may slow, it may stiffen, it may rise depending on the dog's social role and baseline posture. The weight begins to shift either forward onto the forelimbs, indicating offensive arousal, or backward onto the hind limbs, indicating defensive arousal. This postural shift is driven entirely by the sudden engagement of the sympathetic nervous system, and it happens in less than half a second. If you learn to see it, you will have identified the pre-growl state while still firmly in that 3-second window. The mouth changes next. The lips may tighten. The corners of the mouth, what ethologists call the commissures, may pull forward or backward depending on the emotional valence. Forward commissures are associated with offensive states, backward commissures with defensive ones. The muzzle may wrinkle at the base of the nose. The jaw may close with a tension that was not there a moment before. These changes are driven by the activation of the superficial facial muscles through branches of the facial nerve. which in dogs is exquisitely responsive to limbic system activation. Your dog's face is providing you with a real-time readout of their limbic state, and it is updating continuously in those 3 seconds. The eyes shift to a fixed, hard gaze or alternatively to a whale-eye expression depending on the dog's arousal profile. A hard, unblinking, direct stare is associated with offensive threat processing. The dog is tracking the stimulus with the intensity of a predator assessing a target. The whale-eye expression, where the white sclera becomes visible at the eye corners due to the head turning slightly away while the gaze remains fixed, is associated with defensive conflict. The dog wants distance but cannot or will not retreat. Both expressions are neurologically distinct, and both tell you something different about the intervention that will be most effective. And then the growl comes. And here is the moment I promised you at the beginning of this video, the reframe that changes everything. The growl is not aggression. The growl is communication. It is the sound of a dog who is still choosing language over action. The growl is your dog's most honest, most vulnerable, most important sentence. It is the sentence that says, "I am frightened," or "I am in pain," or "I am overwhelmed and I need this to stop." The most dangerous response. The response that the science of canine behavioral development tells us with absolute consistency leads to escalation, to redirected aggression, to bite incidents, to the destruction of trust, is punishment. Punishing a growl does not address the emotional state that generated it. It removes the warning system while leaving the emotional state fully intact. It is the behavioral equivalent of removing the battery from a fire alarm because the sound is inconvenient. The fire is still burning, now you just cannot hear it. A landmark study published in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science, examining the behavioral histories of dogs who had bitten without apparent warning, found a consistent pattern. A significant proportion of those dogs had prior histories of having their warning signals, growling, stiffening, whale eye, corrected or suppressed through punishment. The warning signals disappeared not because the emotional state resolved, but because the dog learned that expressing the warning led to aversive consequences. The stress remained, the cortisol remained, the threat perception remained, only the communication was silenced. And when a dog is pushed past their threshold with no remaining communicative outlet, the next signal in the escalation sequence is not another growl. It is a bite that appears to come from nowhere. It never came from nowhere. It came from the silence that was trained into them. If this science is landing with weight right now, please hit the like button. This information reaches other dog owners who need it only when this community engages with it, and these dogs need advocates who understand their language. So what do you do instead? What does the 3-second window actually give you the ability to do, now that you understand what is happening inside your dog's brain during it? It gives you the ability to intervene upstream, before the growl, before the stiffening becomes a freeze, before the conflict resolution process tips toward escalation. It gives you the ability to read the olfactory context, your own emotional state, and regulate yourself first, because your dog is already reading your chemistry and responding to it. It gives you the ability to modify your approach geometry, reducing the threat signal before the amygdala fires in full. It gives you the ability to recognize the postural shift, the commissure change, the hard eye, and respond with spatial decompression, creating distance, reducing pressure, and signaling through your own body language that the threat is receding. Most importantly, it gives you the ability to hear the growl when it comes and respond to it as the gift it is. Because a dog who growls at you is a dog who trusts you enough to tell you the truth. They are saying, "This is where my limit is." They are handing you a map of their emotional world in the only language available to them. And every time you receive that communication with calm, with space, with the removal of whatever pressure triggered it, you are doing something that the research on canine stress neuroscience tells us has measurable, lasting effects. You are training the amygdala. You are building a new associative pathway, one that links the experience of feeling overwhelmed not with escalation and suppression, but with relief and safety. Over repeated experiences. The threshold at which the amygdala fires begins to shift. The 3-second window becomes 4 seconds, then 5. The dog becomes, in the language of behavioral neuroscience, more emotionally resilient, not because the world became less threatening, but because their nervous system learned that their communication would be honored. This is the foundation of everything, not obedience, not dominance, not the suppression of natural canine communication through force or fear. The foundation is this: a dog who believes their signals will be heard does not need to escalate to be understood. And a dog who does not need to escalate is a dog who is safe, who is healthy, who is living with a nervous system that is no longer constantly bracing for the moment their warning is ignored. Your dog has been speaking to you in the most honest language they possess for every moment of their life with you. The 3 seconds before the growl is not a countdown to danger. It is an invitation to slow down, to look closer, to learn the language of a mind that has been trying to reach you all along. If this video changed the way you see your dog, subscribe right now. Every week on this channel we go deeper into the neuroscience, the ethology, and the behavioral biology that transforms dog owners into the humans their dogs have always needed them to be. Your dog's brain is extraordinary. It is time you understood exactly how extraordinary it really is.